It's Friday, 14 February. Welcome to the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. And I hope your Valentine's Day is going swimmingly. All right, let's get briefed. First, on the heels of President Trump's proposal last week for the U.S. to take control of the Gaza Strip and relocate its Palestinian population, Arab leaders, led by Saudi Arabia, are now scrambling to develop an alternative reconstruction plan. Later in the show, a suspected Russian drone struck the former Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine overnight, damaging its protective shell. Ukrainian President Zelensky called it a, quote, terrorist attack and proof that Vladimir Putin is not serious about pursuing peace. But first, today's afternoon spotlight. President Trump's surprise proposal last week for the U.S. to take control of the Gaza Strip may have left the Arab world stunned, but it also appears to have forced regional leaders to address the problem of post-war governance in the battered enclave sooner than they likely had planned. According to 10 sources, that's a lot of sources, that spoke exclusively to Reuters, Saudi Arabia is now spearheading urgent Arab efforts to develop an alternative reconstruction plan for Gaza to counter Trump's proposal to relocate the Palestinian population and turn the enclave into a Middle East Riviera. While details are fairly sparse at this time, draft ideas will reportedly be discussed at an emergency summit hosted by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh later this month, and will include input from all the key regional players, including Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Palestinian representatives. Early reports indicate that proposals will focus on creating a Gulf-led reconstruction fund and striking a deal with the U.S. and Israel to sideline Hamas from any role in the future governance of the Gaza Strip. As a reminder, Trump made headlines, to put it mildly, last week when he declared that the U.S. would, quote, own Gaza by leveling the war-torn strip in order to spearhead reconstruction and create economic opportunities that could take up to 10 to 15 years. While reconstruction is underway, he said that the more than 2 million inhabitants of Gaza would be relocated to neighboring countries. The sources who spoke with Reuters said that Trump's idea left Arab leaders aghast and angry. Well, that's never a good combination. I mean, you could be either aghast or you could be angry, but both at the same time, well, that's a recipe for chaos. As we previously discussed on the PDB, Egyptian, Saudi, and Jordanian leaders were quick to publicly condemn and reject the proposal. Saudi leaders were particularly dismayed by Trump's remarks, as it would upend their plans to make the creation of a Palestinian state a precondition to normalizing ties with Israel. But the oil-rich kingdom is also seeking to secure an ambitious military pact with the U.S. that would help shore up their defenses against Iran, and solving the Gaza problem in a way that's acceptable to the Trump administration will be likely critical to advancing those interests. Arab leaders are now hurriedly working to slap together a plan that they can sell to President Trump. They're even considering calling it the, quote, Trump plan in a bid to win his support. Seriously? Sources say at least 4 proposals are currently on the table, but a plan recently put forth by Egyptian officials has reportedly emerged as the best potential path forward. So, you ask, what do we know about Cairo's vision for the reconstruction in Gaza? Well, the Egyptian plan involves creating a national Palestinian committee to govern the enclave, with Hamas barred from participating. The committee would oversee a reconstruction effort that would rely on money from both the international community and the Gulf states, a fund that may potentially be named the, quote, Trump Fund for Reconstruction. A buffer zone would also be established, and a physical barrier would be erected along Gaza's border with Egypt to prevent Hamas from building new tunnels, so possibly a big, beautiful wall. But I don't believe the Mexican government will pay for this one. Additionally, 20 areas would be set up as temporary living zones for displaced Gazans, while some 50 Egyptian and foreign companies would be brought in to carry out rebuilding efforts. The proposal would allow Palestinians to stay in the Gaza Strip with the hopes of eventually reaching a point where a two-state solution can be pursued. But any plan involving a two-state solution will be a tough sell, given Israel's historical opposition to such efforts. Officials in Jordan said MBS's involvement will be critical in selling the plan to the U.S., given the Crown Prince's generally warm relationship with Trump. The Jordanian official told Reuters, quote, "We are telling the Americans that we have a plan that works. Our meeting with MBS is going to be critical. He is taking the lead," end quote. As I noted, however, many analysts doubt the feasibility of a plan that envisions a Palestinian state, noting Israel is not likely to accept such an outcome. Israeli leaders, in fact, have publicly backed Trump's proposal to temporarily relocate Gazans out of the enclave, saying it would address their long-term security concerns in the region. When asked to comment on the upcoming Arab summit in Riyadh on 27 February, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, quote, "Right now, the only plan, and they don't like it, but the only plan is the Trump plan. So if they've got a better plan, now's the time to present it," end quote. All right, coming up next, a suspected Russian drone struck the former Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine overnight, damaging its protective shell. I'll have those details when we come back. Running a business isn't easy. I know that firsthand. Look, as a business owner, I've seen how managing finances can turn into a time-consuming headache with endless receipts, approvals, and expense tracking slowing everything down. And that's where Ramp comes in. Ramp streamlines finance operations by automating the entire process. There's no more chasing receipts or manually logging expenses. Ramp takes care of it all, instantly matching receipts, categorizing purchases, and approving transactions while integrating seamlessly with your ERP for real-time visibility. For finance teams buried in busy work, Ramp flips the equation. Look, most companies spend about 80% of their time on low-value tasks and only about 20% on strategy. Think about that. Ramp changes that situation, freeing up your team to focus on forecasting, growth, and high-impact decisions. And making the switch is effortless, and that's important. Over 25,000 businesses, including Shopify and the Boys and Girls Club of America, they trust Ramp, earning it the #1 ranking in spend management by G2. And now, for a limited time, listeners of this show can get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/PDB. Ramp.com/PDB. That's RAMP.com/PDB. Cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, and as they always say, terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Afternoon Bulletin. Despite the Trump administration's push for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine this week, escalations on the battlefield are sowing doubts about whether the Kremlin is serious about ending their 3-year-old war against Kyiv. According to the Ukrainian military, a Russian military drone armed with a high-explosive warhead struck the former Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine overnight, causing extensive damage to the containment shell that protects the reactor and prevents radiation leaks. The protective shelter, which was installed back in 2016 over a separate containment structure, reportedly sustained a large hole from the unmanned aircraft, which also ignited a fire. Now, I'm sure you don't need reminding that Chernobyl was the site of the world's largest nuclear meltdown disaster in history, and that was back in 1986. In a post on social media, Ukrainian President Zelensky called the damage, quote, significant, though stressed that the fire has since been extinguished and there were no signs of increased radiation at the plant following the incident. Officials with the UN International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, later confirmed that radiation levels remained normal and that the drone did not manage to breach the defunct nuclear plant's inner containment shell. Zelensky condemned Russia over the incident, calling it a, quote, terrorist attack for the entire world. Zelensky added, quote, the only country in the world that attacks such sites, occupies nuclear power plants, and wages war without any regard for the consequences is today's Russia, end quote. Representatives for the Kremlin, meanwhile, categorically denied any involvement in the strike. We know nothing about it. A Kremlin spokesman said, quote, the Russian military does not do this. Most likely, we are talking about provocation and fraud, end quote. The strike comes as world leaders gather in Germany for the annual Munich Security Conference this weekend, where senior U.S. officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Rubio, are set to meet with Zelensky and other European leaders to discuss President Trump's plans to broker peace negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. As we've been tracking here on the PDB, Trump held his first phone call with Putin since returning to office on Wednesday morning and said they had agreed to start negotiations immediately to end the war. The phone call caught much of Europe by surprise, putting it mildly, and has triggered an international debate over whether Putin can be trusted to negotiate in good faith. Really? There's a debate over whether Putin can be trusted? I mean, frankly, who are the gormless folks who are debating on the side that Putin can be trusted? Look, it's not a matter of trust. That doesn't play into this when you're talking about a character like Putin. It's a matter of striking a deal that can be enforced. Zelensky pointed to the latest incident at Chernobyl on Friday as proof that Russia is not serious about pursuing peace. Zelensky said, quote, "This means that Putin is definitely not preparing for negotiations. He's preparing to continue deceiving the world. That is why there must be unified pressure from all who value life, pressure on the aggressor. Russia must be held accountable for its actions." End quote. And that, my friends, is the PDB Afternoon Bulletin for Friday, 14 February. And for those of you celebrating Valentine's Day, well, I hope it's full of chocolates and flowers and cheesy sentimental cards and romance in whatever style or manner you prefer your romance. And here's a thought. If your Valentine's evening does turn romantic and your special someone whispers, "Hey, put something on the sound system to get me in the mood," well, remember that the President's Daily Brief is available on all podcast platforms, and the PDB would be honored to be the soundtrack to your Valentine's evening sexy time. Or, I suppose, you could go with Amy Winehouse or Adele or Guns N' Roses. It's your choice. And if things wrap up early, well, remember that the latest episode of our extended weekend show, the PDB Situation Report, well, that launches at 10 p.m. tonight on the First TV. And it's also available, of course, on our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief. Tune in. We're digging into cartel activity on the U.S. southern border and the potential for unilateral U.S. military action against the cartels. We're also talking about tariffs being announced by the Trump administration and their potential impact on the U.S. and global economies. And we're also looking at the troubling U.S. dependency on China and India for critical drugs, which one could argue is a serious national security concern. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back over the weekend with the PDB Situation Report. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.